Hi everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, what's going on? Hold on. Hum?
Oh, what's going on? Hold on.
Ho hum.
Oh, hum.
What if I use the onboard mic?
What if I use the onboard mic?
Pause the video feed.
Pause the video.
Can I mute it? Can I mute it? Yeah, the other tab is the one I'm broadcasting from. I'm I unplugged my lavalier mic and am working off the onboard microphone. Is that better? Yes, it is. This is the chat page. The video feed is playing. I'm looking at myself. Bear with us, folks. I just want to. They are? Yes. Oh, I heard the echo. Hold on. Let's try this. Is there an echo now? Boy, that's a big hum. Wow, that's loud. Okay, if the echo's gone, I'm going to go ahead and start. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to George Donnelly for having me. My name is Gene Basler. I know that this is the earliest spot on the conference on a Sunday morning, and it means a lot to me that you're here, folks. I want to thank George Donnelly for having me on the show. I want to thank Enemy of the State for letting me know about the conference. It's been really good. So I'm a tree care professional. The other name for that is arborist. And my talk today is about the Hispanic worker, although it should really be about any laborer who makes the gutsy move to uproot himself or herself and present himself or herself to a completely foreign society, asking nothing more than to engage in voluntary exchange. Therefore, despite all the terms, some of which I intend to attack in this speech and exhort listeners to stop using, that are out there to describe this phenomenon, I shall in my talk use the term trans-regional market participant. My talk is based on the assumption that the audience understands anarchy and agorism and what agorists are really doing, namely being the change they want to see in the world, although the person who first said that was by no means an agorist. Even a stop clock is right twice a day. Briefly, what do I mean by that? Well, if one understands the basic principles of self-ownership and non-aggression, and the basic right to do whatever one pleases that doesn't violate these principles, including keeping or giving away the tangible property resulting from voluntary exchange, and if one decides to practice these principles every day, consciously or unconsciously, then one is practicing agorism. And I intend to demonstrate that there are tens of millions of people in the society that is currently known as the United States practicing agorism every day. And I think if we take a close look up and down our streets, we can learn a thing or two about it. My perspective in this talk is also predicated on the assumption that you, dear audience, have already figured out that these trans-regional market participants are in many ways the backbone of the economy. That is the so-called U.S. economy. But the further point there being that they can be the backbone of your economy. You guys in New Hampshire and all the decentralized network free societies that we are all working to build and link up with. So hopefully folks can figure out that that we can get to know these people, understand them, and work with them. Bear with me. And I just gave that whole introduction and forgot the recorder. So I run crews who are mostly Hispanic, and I've come, of course, to develop a profound respect for the men and women who've worked for me over the years. I've worked with people from, I've either worked for me or worked with them. I've gone down the list: Mexico, El Salvador, Brazil, Dominican Republic, Guatemala, Colombia, Jamaica, Haiti, Belize, Nicaragua, Puerto Rico, Bahamas, Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, Turkmenistan, Israel, Lebanon, Russia, Belarus, Georgia, Ukraine, Serbia, Philippines, Thailand, Laos, Kenya, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Armenia, and probably a few other places I haven't thought of. I'm not alone. You too have worked with or done with business with people from as many places, if not more, and I say this with confidence because I'm not a particularly well-traveled person. So everybody here understands that agorism is natural, it's a reality, it's being practiced every day. I like to think of every human going through his life as practicing agorism to a certain percentage of the human action a person engages in from morning till night, and that statism is a very tiny percentage of that, or the voluntary associations in which we engage represent a far larger percentage of the millions of individual human actions that we engage in every day, and that those that are influenced by the institution of coercion are relatively small, and that all we're trying to do here with this conference is to make that 0. So in that regard, the trans-regional market participant is practicing agorism, not because they read it in a book, but because the powerful feedback mechanism that the market provides has led them to practice agorism. I want to put to bed here the wild-eyed notion that we agorists or agorists are wild-eyed optimists who are trying to put into practice an unsustainable pipe dream. Such skeptics need only look down the street and observe the lawn crews mowing their neighbors' lawns, the painters painting their neighbors' houses, and the housekeepers cleaning their neighbors' and their own houses and offices. These head down, nose to the grindstone, quiet toilers who are doing and not talking have much to teach us. Can somebody type in a text, let me know if I'm being heard okay? Because I turned the volume down completely on my mic. All of us who aspire to be this change we want to see in the world should take a closer look at these unwitting heroes, these agorist economic participants in our midst. Thank you. Thank you, Cody. I plan to outline some of the many ways, by no means a comprehensive list, these trans-regional market participants are agorist practitioners, and to point out some of the flaws in the common thinking regarding these trans-regional market participants in a society's economy. Throw some terms into the dustbin along with some myths, misconceptions, and all-around wrong-headed thinking. I hope to help you when discussing this controversial issue with others, but I also intend to make the case that it's wasted time to try to argue with neoconservatives. And I also have a few ideas for creating a sanctuary city within your the milieu of your Free State Project, No State Project, or agorist local co-op business network that all of us are here trying to do in the various geographical areas that we live in. You create a sanctuary city, overcome the language barrier, you can double or even triple the numbers of people who are acting within your agorist market in a very short period of time. I'm going to let that sink in a little bit. So, the trans-regional market participant offers his or her services without first going to the local office of thievery to get a permission slip, also known as a business license. This is, as agorists all know, in itself an act of heroism, not only because of the risk of being deported to the unpleasant place from whence they came, but also because this permission slip automatically makes one a tax collector. And the refusal to obtain a business license is by logical extension a refusal to be a tax collector. And by further logical extension, it is a refusal to commit an unprovoked act of aggression against one's neighbor. And I could end my talk here. This alone should be all the evidence a person needs that the actions of these trans-regional market participants deserve our praise. But it doesn't stop there. The trans-regional market participant further engages in heroism by usually asking to work for a fixed price. I don't know if you've ever hired a housekeeper to clean your house and she brought a couple kids along to help and they really took their time to do it right. You might have done the math and figured out that they just cleaned your house for less than minimum wage. Oh my God, I just exploited these workers. Like hell you did. You wouldn't have hired them at minimum wage, and therefore they wouldn't have had to work. If you hadn't hired them to clean your house and had elected instead to clean it yourself, or to let it ride another couple of weeks, then they would have had no work at all. Eventually, they would have found their way to the public handout line. Why, you ask, is this heroism? Well, simply put, anyone who provides a good or service without sticking a gun in your face is a hero. And anyone who manages to do a slightly better job for slightly less money than the next guy is a hero. Everybody wins. There is no exploitation in voluntary contracts. The only exploitation occurs in the presence of coercion. And the only time game theory, the notion that economics is a zero-sum game in which one person wins and the other loses, is in effect, is when the institutions of coercion are at play. The trans-regional market participant honors his or her contracts. They know damn well that it is the state, not ordinary people, who breaches contracts. They have a strong distrust of government. And I don't just mean the police and the criminal justice system. You have to consider that these people, every last one of them, are political refugees. They come from places where people ain't treated so well. As a matter of fact, they are usually fleeing from oppressive regimes who are being propped up by the United States. And in these places, in the media, that fact isn't hidden from the people the way it is here. So these people are acutely cognizant of who provides the financial backing to the oppressors in the regime where they come from. They understand this. It's not hidden. They don't need a wake-up call. They come from the bleeding edge where they are living the oppressive U.S. empire every day. This is why they smile knowingly at Americans when they rush out to the ballot box to cast their votes. They smile at us the way a father smiles at his son who's trying to make an acquaintance with a girl on the playground. Again, I say, all these points that I'm trying to make aren't because the trans-regional market participant has picked up, has somehow stumbled across Mises.org or Stateless U or Center for a Stateless Society or LouRockwell.com or antiwar.com. I'm just saying, look, these people just get it, right? Now, I understand, that over in Egypt and Libya, some folks are, actually have read. At least I heard this thinking on anti-war the other day. Some folks over there actually have read Thomas Paine. But the point is, they don't need Hans Hermann Hoppe to tell them that democracy is a failure. They don't need to read the Black Book of Communism to know that communism is a failure. And they don't need Rothbard or Paul to know that the U.S. currency is about to crash. The trans-regional market participant may distrust the government, but he or she really hates banks. Savings, checking, retirement, the stock market, they don't trust any of this. And why should they? You can bet that where they came from, the fiat currency has already done its job of concentrating the wealth in a very few hands. And they know damn well what direction the U.S. dollar is headed. Ask any one of them. As Joseph Salerno said, they're poor, they're not stupid. Now, Joe Salerno was speaking in general about poor people. Vis-a-vis the trans-regional market participant, I might make a correction. They're uneducated. They're not stupid. And this is true. One of the reasons these people are so effective, so effective at practicing everyday agorism is because most of them don't have more than a third-grade education, so they haven't had this statism pounded into their heads the way we have. They're not authoritarian sociopaths. I'm telling you, I work with these folks. This is something I encourage y'all to pay close attention to what's going on around you. They like silver, and not just because there are lots of silver mines in Mexico. Remember, I'm not just talking about Mexicans. They don't know exactly what government has done to our money, but they know that paper ain't a good store of wealth. Now, here I want to point out a weakness. Not every Hispanic worker, I'm painting a general picture. Not every Hispanic worker knows this. They know they're not putting their money in the bank, but they're kind of storing it under their bed. And these are people who, it's easier to persuade these people to get out of the US dollar than it is to try to persuade somebody listening to AM radio every day or watching Fox. I mean, if you really want to convert people and sell them silver and gold coins and help them bring you silver and gold coins from other places, these people have these what do the Arabs call it? Hawaladar networks? The network in which you don't use Western Union to transfer money across jurisdictions. So understand that these folks are easily converted. And so if you're having a conversation with a trans-regional market participant, talk to them about the dollar getting ready to crash. First of all, they might look at you with some surprise as being an American who knows this. But also tell them that, you know, you too are looking for ways to get out of the US dollar, and that silver and other tangible commodities as well as gardening are options. I have some that help me with my gardening. They're good gardeners, by the way. That's not one of the points I made in my talk. So my prediction here today is that we are going to begin to see the trans-regional market participant begin to do business with one another with silver coin, maybe even with the Chinese renminbi. I suspect that they're already doing so. Remember, these people don't send all their money back to the places where they came from. They send a lot of it home, but they have an economy and they like to do business with each other. Alright? They buy tacos from each other. They hire each other to help them mow lawns and clean houses. They hire people like them to paint their houses and fix their cars. They buy cars from each other. They buy groceries from each other. They sell the tomatoes out of their gardens from each other. They buy groceries, they buy haircuts, they buy clothes, and they buy babysitting services. And I haven't even scratched the surface. These people are therefore inherently engaged in community agorist activities. That's what I'm saying. Pay attention. We're missing out on some pretty interesting stuff right up and down our streets here. I live in Texas, but I've lived in, you know, Missouri, California, Colorado, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. Mostly the folks I work with here are from Mexico and El Salvador. When I was in Boston, they were from Brazil. I worked up in New England with folks from Serbia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Guatemala, Dominican Republic, Colombia. I'm losing my train of thought here, so I'm going to go back to where I was talking about. They're therefore engaged in community agorist activities, and they save. Point number 37. Keynesians hate trans-regional market participants because they save money, and everybody knows spending stimulates the economy. Well, agorists, adherents to Austrian economics, and people who understand causal realist economics realize that saving stimulates the economy, not spending. Saving and investing are some synonymous terms. It can be argued, I think it can be argued, that the trans-regional market participant is one of the largest segments of the population of the so-called United States that actually saves. So I predict that in the near future, as the dollar continues to slide, These guys are going to start transferring their paper dollars that they've hidden under their mattresses into silver and gold coin. I suspect that they are already, to some extent, trading with one another using silver and gold coins. There's an opportunity here for the budding agorist, and I encourage you to contact me if you want to discuss this further. Mexican silver is a good commodity, and one would do well to establish contacts who can provide it. There's the Mexican Libertad, the Calendario Azteca, and many others. If you speak Spanish, then there might be an opportunity to start a community-based counter-economy using silver coins. Actually, you'll find that the community counter-economy is already in place. Your simple task is only to encourage and facilitate the use of silver instead of paper dollars. And as the dollar sinks, that task will become easier day by day. I'm telling you folks, this is a way to earn converts. You don't have to read human action to them. You just need to tell them, get out of the dollar and I will help you. Go to flea markets, buy some silver on eBay, have some brochures made up saying, you who already distrust banks are correct to have your money out of under your mattress and not in a bank, but you got to get it out of the dollar. They already know this. They're feeling it. One guy told me, he says, I already knew this, but we know it's coming soon because we're hearing white people talk about it. It's kind of funny, you know, because they already knew this. Another thing about the trans-regional market participant, trans-regional market participants buy guns, and they don't ask permission to do so. They take their safety and their family's safety and their community security into their own hands. This is not to say that they act alone. Just last month, let me give you an example. I've avoided telling stories, but just last month, one of my most highly skilled, highly trained foremen was in his apartment watching TV, and he heard a woman screaming from the parking lot. He appeared on the balcony, gun drawn, looked around himself. There's a half a dozen other dudes emerged from their apartments with their guns drawn. Needless to say, this woman's two attackers fled. Alright? This is not in the newspaper. You read about people on LouRockwell.com, they say never ever speak to the police. Thank you. These people already know that. You don't need to tell them. I should further point out the trans-regional market participant does not use these guns to coerce people to do business with them, despite fear-mongering by neoconservative and progressive alike to the contrary. Again, I say we can learn much from these people, most of whom don't even have a third-grade education. Speaking of third-grade educations, I had a foreman a couple of years ago who actually did have a third-grade education. And this guy had rental properties on both sides of the Mexican border and Mexico-Texas border. Spent his weekends tending to them. Ooh, thank you, Mama. Again, I say, uneducated does not mean stupid. In fact, they're more likely to listen and be open to what you have to tell them. Tell more stories. Well, I just did. I just told another one. So, sometimes trans-regional market participants are called undocumented workers. What a disgusting term. There are 6.9 billion humans on this planet, and not a single one of them needs a piece of paper to prove that he belongs here, or she belongs here. It's a sick notion. Well, the very notion conjures up images of a train platform in a black and white movie with thugs in costumes harassing distraught travelers asking for their papers. Papers? What papers? Am I trespassing on your private property? Do you own this platform? No? Okay, conversation over. Well, you might say the ID proves that you are who you say you are. What? Well, that's a conversation for another talk. Let's just say you're not who you say you are. So what? You're not trespassing. So who cares if you call yourself by a different name every day? If you came to me and exchanged an honest day's work for a pouch full of pieces of metal as agreed, then what the hell do I care whether you are who you say you are? Well, you say, what if he's a convicted murderer? Well, if he is, then you don't have to hire him. And you can fire him because he's not a member of a union and he's not gonna be anytime soon. But don't tell me I can't hire him. As far as I know, if he is a convicted murderer, he's already been punished for his crime. I've hired a lot of ex-cons. Yeah, I agree, Voluntary Joe, who says in the chat room, undocumented should be a label of pride. We're all undocumented. No, we're not. We got driver's licenses. So, back to the argument, what if he's a convicted murderer? Alright, you know what? If he victimizes me, then we'll deal with that the same as anybody else, regardless of prior record. If it's bad enough, I'll use the market to punish him. I'll tell all my other friends in the industry, this guy steals. You know, or this guy, you know, whatever. Don't hire him. He'll move on. Eventually, find a society whose values are more in line with his, and the point is that the market is a harsher punisher than these folks with their immigration laws. Bureaucratic agencies trying to keep tabs on everybody aren't doing anybody any good. I think that's why they hate the market so much. So this takes us to private property. You might find this to be the basis for the whole discussion. Either you stand where you are with the permission of him who owns the land under your feet, or you're trespassing. Well, in the case of the entrepreneur who hires laborers and doesn't ask where they came from, is I own the land, I run the business, I don't care how you got here or where you came from. If you want to exchange labor with me for a pouch full of pieces of metal, and we agree to this deal, then who's to stop us? Alright? This is profit. This is property and voluntary exchange. And how dare you tell me who I can and can't associate with? Alright, so if I'm trespassing on your property, then I'm trespassing. There's no piece of paper in my pocket that makes it okay. And if you're the property owner, and you know damn well whether I belong on your property or not, so you don't need to see a piece of paper. So what's the purpose of an ID again? And so the myth of needing documents is ridiculous. Sometimes they're called illegal immigrants. Wow. Well, if you thought undocumented workers was a disgusting term, wait till you get a load of this one. Illegal. You march in with your gun, slaughter a bunch of women and children, claim title to the land, draw a line in the sand, and then have the audacity to tell somebody she needs a permission slip to cross it? Now look, I'm not here making an argument that the proponents of a crackdown on immigration are hypocrites because they themselves are here from somewhere else and stolen the whole continent from the people who were here first. Now they're hypocrites all right, but not because of that. People landed on the shores of North America and engaged in trade and voluntary exchange, acquiring clear title to lands. Governments took lands by force, not people. I think it was Terry Anderson, I think he showed something that 80% of the land acquired west of the Mississippi from the natives was acquired by contract, by people, and it wasn't until the Uncle Sam's army with his financial backing from the corporate welfare recipients really came along and started slaughtering people. I don't know. I think that's where the wholesale bloody stealing of lands came in. And I think that anybody who says everything we have is stolen needs to do some homework. I need to do some homework. Who am I kidding? You may think that I digress, but this is all related. The legitimacy of title to property that is claimed to be owned by the state or public property is at the heart of this issue. There are fools who think that just because there's an immigration law that it must therefore be legitimate and therefore it must be enforced. Never mind the cost. Those rich folks are picking up the tab. So my point is that the only illegal border crossing is when you set foot on my property without my permission. So you got communally owned land, and then act surprised when people go on it. So again, reinstitute private property rights, and maybe this so-called government-created immigration issue will correct itself. Perhaps if there's time at the end, we can talk about my take on immigration and whether or not it really is an issue. So anyway, furthermore, the trans-regional market participant has an understanding of markets. This does not mean that they have read Rabbi Lapin, "Thou shalt prosper," but they do understand that profit is the reward for successfully bringing a good or service to market. They have not read Rothbard, but they understand that there is a little something left over after the bills are paid and the kids are fed, then they must be doing something right. They have not read Knock, but they understand full well that their enemy is the state. And they may not be able to articulate it like William Norman Grigg, but they know damn well who the makers are and who the takers are. And they resent the takers. They work many hours in the week, and their children go to be educated at the state schools. There, they learn that handouts are available for the taking. They learn that their hard-working parents are fools. The immigrant worker, try as she might, is just too damn tired at the end of the day to trump all these lies being taught to their children at this school. The divide between the generations is formed, and the children become worshippers of the state. But this is not the fate of all second generations. Right does win out over might in the end, and the quiet determination of the parents does have a profound impact on most of the children. Those who understand that if they work smart, not hard, then they too can earn their keep like their parents, but without the back pain. This is the majority of the children of the immigrants. The rest milk the state. But to think that they are a burden on the social welfare system is absurd, when every recipient of the so-called social welfare system is a burden, regardless of where he or she came from. Ridiculous. Things really are that black and white, by the way. The other reason I hate the term illegal is because the crimes they're accused of breaking are not legitimate crimes under the no victim, no crime axiom. I think it's Mark Stevens of the No State Project, or possibly even Larkin Rose, who calls them people who moved. Awesome term. Oh no, they're not illegal, they're just people who moved. It's a lot simpler than trans-regional market participants. So I'll take questions. Start firing them at me, and I'll take them one at a time, because there's like 21 minutes left, and I'm going to start my conclusion here. In conclusion, the trans-regional market participant sets up shop without obtaining a business license, does not play the role of a tax collector, often circumvents the immoral and racist minimum wage law by contracting for prefix A, honors his or her contracts, distrusts government, doesn't believe in democracy, doesn't believe in socialism, doesn't believe in communism, doesn't believe in capitalism either, for that matter, for what he or she has seen from where he, in the places he comes from. Distrusts banks, likes silver and gold, The trans-regional market participant has already experienced currency debasement on a scale the United States hasn't seen since the greenback or the continental. The trans-regional market participant can easily be persuaded to get his savings out of paper and into commodities like gold and silver. The trans-regional market participant saves, engages in savings. They provide for their own defense, even banding together with their neighbors. They don't vote. And I'm thinking I should say thank your local trans-regional market participant for not voting. That's pretty big. That's why I'm stopping here and letting it sink in. The simple fact that these guys refuse to vote. They never heard of Chodorov. Heck, they never even heard of the Spanish scholastics. But they sure know damn well that voting is stupid. They hate warfare. They hate the police state. They usually don't form unions. And in a rudimentary way, they understand and respect private property. And best of all, they don't engage in the greatest sin of all, envy. After all, isn't that what the state is? At least it's what democracy is. Banding together to use force to take something that ain't yours. It's basically envy. Envy politics. It's a philosophy of envy. In other words, the trans-regional market participant is engaging in voluntary transactions every single day. So get to know the trans-regional market participant in your neighborhood, because my crystal ball tells me that a whole lot more of them are coming this way. And you won't be able to count on them to respect your property, especially considering wherever they came from, they had their property stolen, their high livelihood ripped out from under them, and by a regime propped up by Uncle Sam. If there was ever a time to make arrangements to provide for the defense of yourselves, your property, and your fellow agorists, now is that time. So I kind of turned it around a little bit there at the end. But I want you folks to understand that the institution of private property is not on its way towards being restored in the continent of North America. It's being weakened every day. And agorism only works when the institution of private property is alive and well. And you have to make it so yourselves. I'd say you got to post your title to your land at a freely competing market firm. Form a firm. I mean, you need to assign yourself allodial rights to the property on which you live, regardless of what the current title says. And I think that everybody needs to start forming a sanctuary city, finding a place where these folks can what happened? Okay. Where these folks can come and get some sort of protection from the neocons who are going to try to start herding them into cattle cars along with all the other brown people. Is there any questions? I know that I think it was Lee Sparks wants me to tell some more stories. Before I got into the tree care business, I was in the hotel business, and I had workers from Colombia who had been victims of some unspeakable acts, the kind you see in movies. You don't know they really happen to people. women they themselves are the only survivors of their immediate family. Of course, I worked with a lot of Bosnians when I lived in St. Louis, and there were a number of people from former Yugoslavia up in Connecticut too. And at the time, in the mid-90s, my Serbian and Croatian was a lot more fluent than it is now, so I think it's easier to get to know and understand these people if you make at least a rudimentary attempt to understand their language. I kind of deliberately left out many of the myths about the trans-regional market participant, like they don't bother to learn our language. I told a neocon the other day that, look dude, you don't want them to learn your language. He says, yeah dude, they should all speak English. Well, I said if they did, you'd have to pay them more. Well, you're right about that, she said. So look, you can't have it both ways. You can't have your cheap labor and then rail against them when you go to church. So I'm going to type something here. What would a sanctuary city be like? Alright. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm going to take these. Lauren, I see your two questions. One is, what would a sanctuary city be like? And what do people from other places do to protect their wealth when the government currency falls? Okay, I touched on that second one a little bit. But I think this is an opportunity for agorists. Use the internet to translate what you have to say, but a very simple three-corner brochure or threefold brochure would be, you know, in Spanish, if you went to the flea market, it would say something like, we understand that you don't trust banks, and you're correct for this. You come from a place where the currency has already failed. The US dollar is about to do the same. I have these nice silver coins available right here, and then a little explanation of what junk silver is, what bullion is, what numismatics is. Say these aren't coins that have numismatic value. Their silver content is you know what makes them worth more. Excuse me, in exchange. And I think if you're somebody like Del Valley Silver, you should have a mirror site in Spanish and French and Tagalog, and you name it. Klaus Hertz, I see your question. Do office jobs for trans-regional market participants exist? Yes, they do. But I want to go back to what would a sanctuary city be like. I steal this term from the neoconservatives who call places like Houston and San Francisco that refuse to check ID and conduct random stops the way those heroic Arizonans do. They call these places sanctuary cities because there's no active effort, or at least reduced, not enough on the part in the eyes of the neoconservatives, not enough of an effort to crack down, round up, and deport people who are here so-called illegally. And so that's where the term sanctuary city came from. It came from the evil people, the xenophobes, the white supremacists, and the American exceptionalists who believe that the American can do whatever the hell she wants to other people, but by God, if you look at me askance, I'm going to round you up and ship you back to where it is you came from. So that's what a sanctuary city is. That's what a sanctuary city does look like today. Imagine a place like Seattle, where who was that police chief a few years ago who made the decision, look, our resources are strained already, we're no longer enforcing marijuana laws, or some marijuana laws. They pick some arbitrary unit of measure like ounce or something like that. and said, "Oh, we're not going to enforce anybody who's carrying less than this amount." Well, that's a sanctuary city for pot smokers. So a sanctuary city is a city where there's, in the eyes of many people, not enough enforcement. What would it look like in your agorist community? Well, if you own any land and you can set aside an acre of it and let these people park their trailers there and begin to squat. I don't want them squatting on your land, but if you can let them hang out there in exchange, for some radishes, then you're starting a sanctuary right there. And if you're like me, you live in a development that isn't fully development. It developed because the economy crashed. There's vacant land and vacant homes all over the place. And these people don't need you agorists to tell them how to squat. They're already learning how to do it. But I would say better to embrace them in your community. Excuse me, and that's what I mean, Lauren, by sanctuary city. Make sure that your agorist community is actively seeking out these trans-regional market participants to be, participants in your economy, to buy your wheat, to buy your homespun hemp sandals. Back to Klaus Hertz. Do office jobs for trans-regional market participants exist? Yes, they do. I mean, I guess because I'm in the grain industry and I've been, worked in the hotel business. Anybody who owns a business who is willing to pay cash to his laborers can hire them for whatever they want. I mean, a lot of folks, my folks are on W-2, they're on the payroll and they pay their taxes. But that's because I'm not self-employed yet. I'll work for a big corporation, and we make extensive use of trans-regional market participants. But office jobs, you bet. Here in Houston, Texas, where I live, which by the way is a great place to learn Spanish if you're creative and have a good imagination. There's a high demand for bilingual people, and it doesn't have to be the King's Castilian. I mean, your Spanish, English, neither one has to be that great. I know folks who work in the medical profession that don't even have a GED yet. Because that's another cool thing I should have put in my talk, was that these folks have an inherent distrust of the state monopolized education system. They say, well, why don't I become a certified, echocardiogram technician for $600 and make as much money, if not more, as much money as, if not more than, my, American counterpart who who gave these people whatever 30, 60 grand and still can't get a job, right? So, like in my business, you can become a certified nursery and landscape professional. You become a certified arborist. You can become a certified tree worker, tree climber specialist. These are all voluntary certifications that exist on the market that people have come up with through their voluntary associations to help distinguish themselves from their competitors, and to lend credibility to their operations. And I had a guy who was so fired up about becoming a certified arborist, finally passing the test after the 4th time. He says, "I'm going to go out and I'm going to get my GED." And I thought, I didn't know you didn't have one. I certainly didn't ask as part of the hiring process. And so, I didn't talk him out of getting his GED. I was like, why are you going to get your GED? You already got the job, man. I mean, and that, that's the next point. These guys know how to work their way up. These guys will go up to their boss and buy into an ownership stake in a business. They do it all the time. I see it. under the table cash operations are you know, working in corporate structures, you know, the same way, you know, so-called legitimate businesses do. So again, I say they don't have a traditional education, but they're not stupid, and they save their money. Tanya Sargent DeCant says she knew a girl from Mexico who worked in an office as a bilingual receptionist for a lawyer. She's right. She says that so-called illegals with fake Social Security numbers actually pay more taxes because they can't file for a refund for fear that they might be found out. That's correct. Uncle Sam just sucks out the taxes but doesn't give them their refund back. So they do pay a higher percentage in taxes. But oh yeah, you know, fake Social Security numbers they're how it works. I mean, the folks that work for under the table cash are fewer and farther between. Most of them are W-2. Yeah, Social Security is being propped up by fake Social Security number users. The same neocons who would never give up the Social Security system. By God, I've been paying into it all these years. I want my check too. They are the same people who want to round up and ship back to Mexico those who were keeping it solvent. Alright, so it's 4 minutes. What do I do now, George? I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. How many people were there? 20? 10? 5? I know it's early, and if you have any questions, thank you very much. info@wideworldoftrees.com. wideworldoftrees.com is my blog. 3940 people. I also have a YouTube channel with over 650 videos. It's Secunda Flora. It's a botanical word. SECUNDIFLORA. Just type in Gene Basler, BASLER, into YouTube. And thank you very much for tuning in. What do I do now? Hit pause?